It was obviously made to be piloted by something smaller than the average human being, very cramped in there.
What were the size of these seats that were in there?
The seats were very small. I'd say about 1/3 to 1/4 the size of a normal human seat. A lot of people say, boy, it must have been exciting to go in there, and I always say it wasn't. It was a very ominous feeling. I know it sounds silly, but it's so unearthly in there.
You have spoken to someone who's actually seen a UFO under a tarpaulin at Area 51.
I have. I've spoken to several people who've seen UFOs or disc-shaped craft out there. There was a woman who was a secretary for a major defense contractor at the Nevada test site who worked on nuclear programs, who told me that she had sat in on conversations between military and civilian contractors at which the Roswell case had been discussed, at which it had been discussed taking some Roswell material to Area 51. The level of secrecy during those meetings was great. Afterward, they'd take the ribbons out of the typewriters she was typing on. She was ready to tell me about this, and I had this conversation with her on the phone. The next day after this conversation takes place, she's visited by two men who say that they work for the company she used to work for, reminding her that she is still under a security oath, told her, we know that you do a lot of traveling back and forth, a lot of long drives between Las Vegas and LA. We'd hate for something to happen to you or your family. No interview. I mean, it happened again and again and again. Same scenario.
Lazar says that in addition to being shown inside the disc, he actually saw it take off from the lake bed.
I was brought into the hangar for one of the short duration tests, and the craft was already outside on the lake bed, and that was pretty much of a marvelous sight. It's a huge thing. It's like seeing a house lift off the ground. You can't imagine the energy involved to do that. Because of the extremely high energy output and the fact that the outside of the craft is used as a conductor, that does ionize the air. And the crafts do, as a byproduct of this, glow at night, and much like a fluorescent tube will light up. So, you know, bright, strange, jumping lights in the sky, that does explain that.
Would you categorically say there is no way that humans could have built the craft that you saw?
Absolutely. I will categorically deny that. Well, I don't know. How exactly should I put that? I guess I can just say it straight out. There is no way that any government on this earth could produce that craft, period. And I defy anyone to argue that point.
One of the big questions that's hung over this whole story is whether Lazar saw a man-made flying disc and not an alien spacecraft.
A lot of these craft which are being developed in secrecy in the United States are tested at night, and one can imagine that seen through kind of half-closed eyes, something like an F-117 stealth fighter or a B-2 bomber, side-on or front-on, would look remarkably like, say, a flying saucer or a UFO.
You see an F-117, or you see tacit blue, or you see a B-2. Particularly if you see it from some fairly unusual angle, you're going to have a very hard time relating that to conventional aircraft. Some of these things can look very strange indeed. So, you know, an unusual but decidedly terrestrial aircraft can certainly present the appearance of a disc from many angles.
I think for anyone who's been out into the western United States and seen the kind of place it is and let their imaginations run riot a bit, it is possible to imagine in these vast test areas technologies which are highly exotic, highly revolutionary, and would change the way we feel about science today. However, to say that that is alien science derived from beyond this world, I think is something which is just, it is unbelievable. It's too much to absorb.
Do you think that some of the truth certainly lies out there in the middle of the Nevada desert at Groom Lake?
I would expect that some of the truth may very well lie out in the desert near Groom Lake. It's the right place for some of it to be. It's isolated, it's under control, it's high security. I don't think we've yet scratched the surface on what's happening out there with regard to flying saucers.
According to Lazar, the craft that they were secretly testing out in the desert at night used an exotic anti-gravity propulsion system.
The reactor itself was an incredibly advanced system. This was an antimatter reactor. This is something we could only dream of having, something that could put out huge amounts of power that rivals several nuclear power plants running at capacity. What happens is a great gravity distortion is created, and you're essentially bending space toward the craft. The craft becomes part of that space, and then when the reactors, or when the gravity amplifiers are shut down, the craft is essentially where it was focused. It's a very difficult thing to grasp. It happens virtually instantaneously because of the fact that gravity distorts time, and if you're bending space and time along with it, when you wind back up in that place, you're there between the ticks of a clock.
Looking at nighttime video films out in the test site area, we've seen video of craft that were luminous, that would move across the sky as if it was skipping a stone across water, or sort of a sewing machine effect. What we see across the screen are a series of lights, of dashes of light, as the object moves from point A to point B. Therefore, we are seeing what you might call a shadow effect of the propulsion mechanism at work.
Bob Lazar is not the only person who's come forward and claimed to have worked out at the base on flying discs. Former US Marines test pilot Bill Uhouse worked out at Groom Lake and other top-secret locations for more than 40 years, working for the Pentagon and civilian contractors on a variety of highly classified projects, including, he says, a flying disc recovered from a crash in Kingman, Arizona in May 1953. He said that he'd been cleared to do this interview and to discuss certain information, but asked us not to show his face.
What were you actually working on out there?
One of the things I worked on was a flying disc simulator. It was designed in New Mexico by a separate staff that built it in parallel with the actual craft that they had intended to fly. The purpose of the simulator was to train pilots to fly this strange-looking craft. The simulator was a 10-meter round disc. The skin was made of boron composite material, not unlike that you see on the F-117.
How did you know how to build the simulator?
Essentially, there weren't any plans. The plans were generated as we constructed it. And there was a process there that took quite a while for us to even understand the concept way back in the 50s.
Uhouse says that Lazar did work at Area 51.
I think Bob is saying exactly what he knows, and I know a little bit about Bob from a different standpoint than a lot of the people know and what's been written about him, but Bob Lazar is not lying as far as his place and position and the activity he was involved with at the time, although some of it, you know, he couldn't recall, but there's a lot of reasons why Bob was hired, number one. You know, here's the thing. Take a guy like Bob, send him out there, you know, somebody said, you know, aliens, blah, 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 blah. You know, all of a sudden you're thinking about 9 alien crafts. You know, they may have not been 9 alien crafts.
Bravo 7014, contact departure, good day.
Do you believe that the government has recovered alien spacecraft?
I have no doubts whatsoever that the United States has actually recovered a number of extraterrestrial vehicles.
And what do they do with them?
I think that since 1947, there have been efforts to try and duplicate the technology, what is referred to as reverse engineering. And I don't know how far they've got, but some reports indicate that we've actually been test flying within a limited area actual alien vehicles or terrestrial vehicles, United States vehicles, which have been made using alien technology.
Could these not just be military aircraft?
Well, I think it's quite possible some of them are military aircraft. I've heard from very reliable sources, including a leading specialist on unmanned aerial vehicles, that we have developed some disc-shaped platforms for aerial reconnaissance, some quite small, maybe some larger, which are being utilized by the Americans and have been built by the Americans.
That's 6389 Delta Las Vegas Tower, runway 1 on a left taxi into position and hold traffic crossing downfield.